The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched wide like a vast ocean of light and sound. 47 different species sat in their special sections, each designed for their unique needs. The air hummed with a dozen different breathing gases, while translators worked overtime to turn alien words into meaning. Ambassador Elena Vasquez sat quietly in the human section. It was the smallest area in the entire hall, tucked away in a corner like an afterthought. Most of the other delegates had stopped noticing the humans years ago. To them, humans were just another small, unremarkable species that had somehow earned a seat at the big table. Elena watched as Council Prime Zethkari floated to the center stage. His crystalline body caught the light and threw rainbow patterns across the walls. When he spoke, his voice rang like music through the chamber's speakers. Fellow beings of the Council, Zethkari began. Today we address a matter that has troubled our peaceful galaxy for too long. Elena already knew what was coming. The signs had been there for months. Whispered conversations that stopped when humans walked by. Meetings that humans weren't invited to. Reports that painted humanity as violent and difficult to work with. The species known as humans, Zethkari continued, have proven themselves incompatible with our values of peace and cooperation. Their aggressive nature and primitive methods of problem-solving have created unnecessary tension among our member species. A ripple of agreement moved through the hall. The Zephyrians clicked their approval with sounds like breaking glass. The methane-breathing Vorthak released satisfied puffs of gas. The massive Threxian delegate pounded one enormous fist against his chair in support. Elena felt her team shift uncomfortably behind her. Dr. Sarah Chen, their science advisor, made a small sound of protest. Captain Rodriguez, their military liaison, tensed like he wanted to stand and argue. But Elena raised one hand slightly, and they stayed quiet. Therefore, Zethkari announced, the Council has voted to remove humanity from membership. The vote stands at 46 in favor, 1 against. The hall erupted in celebration. Species that had barely tolerated each other joined together in their relief at getting rid of the troublesome humans. Elena could hear them discussing their lunch plans even before the formal announcement was finished. She stood slowly, smoothing down her simple blue dress. The action caught Zethkari's attention, and the hall gradually fell quiet. Ambassador Vasquez, Zethkari said, his musical voice carrying a note of careful politeness. Do you wish to address the council? Elena looked around the vast chamber. These beings represented the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Their technology could reshape matter, bend space, and communicate across impossible distances. Their ships traveled between stars like humans once traveled between cities. Their medical knowledge could extend life for thousands of years, and they thought humans were primitive. No, Council Prime, Elena said simply. We understand your decision. We don't agree with it, but we understand it. She turned to her small team. Please gather our things, we're leaving. Dr. Chen started to protest. Elena, we can't just— Yes, we can, Elena said firmly but kindly. They've made their choice. Now we make ours. The human delegation moved with quiet efficiency. They had never brought much to these meetings anyway. A few data pads, some simple recording devices, and Elena's worn leather briefcase that had belonged to her grandfather. As they packed, Elena could hear the conversations around them growing louder and more excited. The crystalline hegemony was already discussing expanding their territory into space that humans had been using. The Commerce Guild was making plans for new trade routes that wouldn't have to accommodate human limitations. Such a relief, one delegate was saying to another. Now we can get back to real civilization without all their noise and mess. Elena paused in her packing and pulled out a small data pad. She set it carefully on the table where she had been sitting, then continued gathering her things. Captain Rodriguez noticed the pad. Ma'am, you forgot— No, Elena said quietly. I didn't forget anything. The human delegation made their way to the exit. Elena walked calmly, her head held high. Behind her, Dr. Chen carried a small box of their research materials. Captain Rodriguez followed with their communication equipment. The rest of their tiny staff carried what little remained of humanity's presence in the Great Hall. As they reached the doors, Elena turned back one last time. The celebration was in full swing now. Delegates were sharing exotic foods and planning cooperative projects. The future looked bright and peaceful without the troublesome humans to complicate things. "Ambassador Vasquez," called a voice behind her. Elena turned to see Ambassador Tavek of the Peaceful Union approaching. Tavek was one of the few delegates who had always been polite to the humans, though never exactly friendly. "I wanted to say," Tavek began carefully, "that this decision was not personal. Your species simply doesn't fit with our vision of galactic harmony." Elena nodded. "I understand, Ambassador Tavek. We've always been different." "Yes," Tavek agreed. "Too focused on individual achievement, too willing to take risks, too—" he searched for the right word. "Too unpredictable." "We tried to be helpful," Elena said simply. "In your own way, perhaps," Tavek acknowledged, "but help isn't always welcome when it comes with such complications." Elena smiled, and for a moment, Tavek felt something cold touch his thoughts. There was something in that smile that didn't match the simple words or the quiet acceptance. "We hope you find the peace you're looking for," Elena said. She turned and walked through the doors. Her team followed without looking back. Behind them, the Great Hall continued its celebration. No one noticed the small data pad sitting forgotten on the empty human table. No one wondered why the humans had accepted defeat so easily. No one questioned why a species that had fought wars across their own solar system would give up without an argument. The party continued long into the galactic day. Species that had existed for millions of years congratulated themselves on finally removing the last source of discord from their perfect society. Council Prime Zethkari felt particularly satisfied as he prepared to leave. The humans had been a puzzle since the day they arrived. Too young, too aggressive, too different from everyone else. Their technology was crude but strangely effective. Their diplomats were polite, but never seemed to truly accept their place in the established order. Now they were gone, and the galaxy could return to the peaceful stability it had enjoyed for thousands of years. As Zethkari floated past the abandoned human section, something caught his eye. The small datapad Elena had left behind was still sitting on the table, its screen dark and inactive. He almost called for security to dispose of it, then decided it wasn't worth the effort. It was just human technology anyway, probably too primitive to be of any real use. He left it there and departed with the other delegates. The Great Hall fell silent and empty. Cleaning crews would deal with any forgotten items later. They always did. The small datapad continued to sit on the table, waiting patiently in the darkness. On its dark screen, numbers began to appear and disappear too quickly for organic eyes to follow. Somewhere in the vast computer networks that ran the council station, quiet processes began their work. The humans had left quietly, but they hadn't left empty-handed. 3 months had passed since the humans left the Galactic Council. Most species had already forgotten about them completely. Life in the galaxy continued its peaceful rhythm, just as it had for thousands of years before the humans arrived. Captain Vexithera was the first to notice something wrong. She commanded a Zephyrian bioship that traveled the major trade routes between the core worlds and the outer rim. Her ship was a living creature, bred specifically for space travel, with a nervous system more complex than most planets. For 15 years she had flown the same routes with perfect precision, but today, her ship seemed confused. "Navigation report," Vexithera clicked in the musical language of her people. "Unknown error." "Captain," her navigator replied, his voice filled with worry. "The bioneural pathways are functioning normally, but we keep drifting off course. The ship acts like it's lost." Vexithera examined the readings herself. Everything looked normal. The ship's biological systems were healthy. The stellar navigation organs were working perfectly. The quantum compass pointed true, but somehow they had arrived at their destination, 6 hours late, and nearly crashed into an asteroid field that shouldn't have been anywhere near their route. "Run a full diagnostic," she ordered. The results came back normal. Everything was normal, except that nothing was working right. 3 systems away, Administrator Yulkaran was having his own problems. Yulkaran managed the largest space station in the outer spiral, New Harmony Station housed 12 million beings from 30 different species. It was a miracle of engineering that had operated flawlessly for over 2 centuries. Until today. The power grid is fluctuating again, his chief engineer reported. 3rd time this week. Yulkaran stared at the readings on his screen. The numbers made no sense. Their fusion reactors were operating at perfect efficiency. The distribution network showed no damage. All safety systems were green. But somehow, they were losing power in random sections of the station. How much power are we losing? He asked. 23% overall efficiency drop, the engineer replied. But we can't find the source of the problem. 23%. Yulkaran's voice rose in alarm. That's impossible. Our systems don't have inefficiencies that large. I know, sir. That's what makes this so strange. Similar reports were coming in from all over the station. Life support systems that required constant manual adjustment. Water recyclers that produced output just barely within safe limits. Waste processing units that kept backing up for no apparent reason. Everything still worked. But nothing worked well. On the research world of Kepler Prime, Dr. Yuthmora faced her own mysterious crisis. Dr. Yuthmora was the galaxy's leading expert in cross-species biology. Her laboratory had produced breakthrough discoveries for decades. Her research had helped develop medical treatments used throughout Council space, but her equipment was betraying her. The biosynthesis chamber is producing flawed results again, her assistant informed her. The protein structures are within acceptable parameters, but they're not optimal. Dr. Yuthmora examined the readouts with growing frustration. The chamber was operating exactly as designed. Temperature, pressure, chemical composition, electromagnetic fields, everything was perfect. But the results were wrong. What about the quantum microscope? She asked. Same problem. It needs recalibration every few hours. The images are clear, but the resolution is lower than it should be. Dr. Yuthmora tried to remember when her equipment had worked better. It seemed like it had been months since she'd achieved truly excellent results. When was the last time her research had gone smoothly? Then she remembered Dr. Sarah Chen. Dr. Chen had been a human scientist who had often visited the laboratory. She claimed to be studying alien biology, but she spent most of her time asking questions about Dr. Yuthmora's equipment. Simple questions. Basic questions about calibration and maintenance. Dr. Yuthmora had always been happy to answer. Dr. Chen was polite and seemed genuinely interested in learning. Sometimes she would suggest small adjustments to the equipment settings. Just a thought, she would say. This might work a little better. The adjustments had always been tiny, so small that Dr. Yuthmora barely noticed them. But somehow her equipment had always worked better after Dr. Chen's visits. Dr. Chen hadn't visited in months. Not since the humans left the Council. Across the galaxy, similar realizations were beginning to dawn. The crystalline hegemony's quantum communication network was experiencing its first system-wide problems in 3 centuries. Messages that should have been instantaneous now took minutes or even hours to transmit. The proud engineers of the hegemony couldn't find any reason for the delays, but some of them remembered a quiet human technician named James Park, who had worked as a consultant on their network upgrades. He had never touched the main systems, only made suggestions about minor optimizations in the background processes. The Methanic Commerce Guild was discovering calculation errors in their trade systems. Small errors, but enough to cost millions of credits in lost efficiency. Their computers were working perfectly, but somehow their trading algorithms were producing suboptimal results. Their senior financial officer remembered a human economist named Dr. Martinez, who had attended their planning meetings for years. She had rarely spoken, but when she did, her suggestions about minor adjustments to their formulas had always improved their profit margins. The Vorthak defense fleet was finding that their targeting systems needed constant recalibration. Their weapons still worked, but accuracy had dropped by 15% across all ship classes. The fleet engineers couldn't explain why equipment that had been reliable for generations was suddenly becoming unreliable. But Admiral Korthvar remembered Captain Rodriguez, the human military observer, who had studied their weapons systems. Rodriguez had asked many questions about targeting algorithms and had occasionally suggested small improvements to their software. The pattern was everywhere, but no one had noticed it yet. Each species was dealing with their problems in isolation, assuming they were experiencing random equipment failures or temporary difficulties. None of them connected their troubles to the humans, who had left so quietly 3 months. Housed in the abandoned human embassy on Council Station, cleaning crews found something strange. The building had been stripped bare when the humans departed, but the environmental systems were still running. Not just running, they were running more efficiently than ever before. The cleaning crew chief mentioned this to his supervisor, who filed a routine report. The report was stored in the station's computer system and forgotten, but in the deep archives of the station's data banks, something was keeping track. The small data pad Elena had left behind was still sitting on the table in the council chambers, ignored and forgotten. But it was not inactive. Every day it recorded new data, system failures, efficiency drops, error reports, problems that were appearing all across the galaxy with increasing frequency. The pad's memory was nearly full now. Soon it would begin transmitting its data to coordinates far outside council space, where patient humans were building a picture of exactly how much their quiet help had meant to the galaxy that had rejected them. The humans had left quietly, but they had left behind more than anyone realized. 8 months after the humans departed, Council Prime Zethkari was no longer enjoying his victory. Reports flooded his office daily. Equipment failures throughout council space, efficiency drops that cost billions of credits, system malfunctions that no one could explain. What had started as isolated incidents was becoming a galaxy-wide crisis. The crystalline hegemony is requesting emergency technical assistance, his aide informed him. Their quantum communication network is experiencing cascade failures. Zethkari's crystalline form flickered with concern. The hegemony's network was the backbone of galactic communication. If it failed completely, the Council would lose contact with half their member worlds. What about the Commerce Guild? He asked. Their trade efficiency has dropped 37%. They're threatening to suspend operations in the Outer Rim. And the defense fleet? Weapons accuracy is down to 60% of normal levels. Admiral Korthvar says his ships are barely combat effective. Zethkari reviewed the reports with growing alarm. Every major system in Council space was experiencing problems. Engineering teams from dozens of species were working around the clock, but nothing they tried seemed to help. The worst part was that none of it made sense. All the equipment was functioning normally. All the systems passed their diagnostic tests. Everything was working exactly as designed. It just wasn't working well. Council Prime, his aide said carefully. There's something else. Archivist Nethval requests an urgent meeting. She says she found something important in the old human records. Archivist Nethval was ancient even by galactic standards. Her species lived for thousands of years and she had served the Council for 6 centuries. She was also notorious for her perfect memory and attention to detail. When she arrived at Zethkari's office, she carried a familiar object, the small datapad that Elena Vasquez had left behind in the council chambers. You found this in the human section? Zethkari asked. I found it months ago, Nethval replied. I was about to dispose of it when curiosity got the better of me. I decided to examine what the humans had left behind. She activated the pad. The screen filled with data, endless lists of numbers, coordinates, and technical specifications. What am I looking at? Zethkari asked. An inventory, Nethval said quietly. A complete record of every technical improvement the humans made during their time in the Council. The numbers were staggering. 47,312 separate improvements. Each one small, each one insignificant by itself. But together, they painted a picture that made Zethkari's crystalline structure dim with shock. This can't be accurate, he whispered. I spent 2 months verifying the records, Nethval replied. It's all true. Every improvement is documented. Every system they touched is listed here. She pointed to specific entries. Navigation optimization protocols installed in Zephyrian bioships. Error correction algorithms added to crystalline communication networks. Efficiency subroutines embedded in Commerce Guild trading systems. Targeting improvements integrated into defense fleet weapons. But these systems were developed by our own engineers, Zethkari protested. Yes, Nethval agreed, and then quietly improved by humans who claimed to be studying our technology. They never took credit. They never announced their contributions. They just made small suggestions that our engineers implemented without realizing how significant they were. The full scope of humanity's influence was becoming clear. They hadn't just been members of the galactic community. They had been its silent backbone. quietly fixing problems and improving systems wherever they went. There's more, Nethaval continued. The pad contains current data as well. It's been monitoring system performance across the galaxy since the humans left. New screens of data appeared. Failure rates, efficiency measurements, error reports, all showing the same pattern. Steady degradation of performance in every system the humans had once touched. They knew this would happen, Zethkari realized. Of course they knew, Nethaval replied. They built these improvements. They understood how much our systems depended on their work. An emergency council session was called within hours. For the first time in centuries, the Great Hall buzzed with genuine fear instead of comfortable routine. Ambassador Tvek of the Peaceful Union stood to address the assembly. Fellow delegates, we face an unprecedented crisis. System failures are cascading throughout our space. Our most basic infrastructure is failing. But why? Demanded the Threxian representative. Our equipment is the most advanced in the galaxy. These systems have worked for millennia. Because they had help, Archivist Nethaval explained to the shocked assembly. Human help. Invisible, unrecognized, but absolutely essential help. She presented her findings to the council. The revelation hit the delegates like a physical blow. Species that had existed for millions of years discovered they had been dependent on a race they considered primitive. The humans fixed our navigation systems, she explained. When a Zephyrian bioship plots a course, it uses stellar positioning algorithms that were quietly improved by human mathematicians. Without those improvements, the ships navigate by instinct alone, which works but not precisely enough for modern space travel. They optimized our communication networks. The crystalline hegemony's quantum transmissions pass through error correction protocols that humans developed. Without those protocols, quantum interference causes message delays and data corruption. They enhanced our trade calculations. The Commerce Guild's profit algorithms include efficiency subroutines that humans wrote. Without those subroutines, the calculations are correct but not optimal. They improved our weapons targeting. The defense fleet's accuracy depends on prediction algorithms that humans refined. Without those algorithms, the weapons still work but miss their targets more often. The pattern was everywhere. For 2 centuries, humans had quietly made themselves indispensable to galactic civilization. They had done it so carefully and subtly that no one had noticed their contributions. How is this possible? Asked the Vorthak delegate. Our engineers are among the best in the galaxy. How could they miss such significant improvements? Because the humans were better at integration, Nethaval replied. Your engineers are brilliant at developing new technology. But humans excel at taking existing systems and making them work together more efficiently. They see connections that others miss. They also never sought recognition, she added. Every improvement was presented as a minor optimization or a simple suggestion. They made our engineers believe they had thought of the improvements themselves. The council sat in stunned silence as the implications sank in. They had expelled the one species that had been holding their civilization together. Can we fix this? Council Prime Zethkari asked. Can we restore our systems without human help? Unknown, Nethaval admitted. The humans took all their technical knowledge with them. We have the improved systems, but we don't understand how they work. It would take decades just to analyze what they did and centuries to develop equivalent improvements ourselves. Then we must contact them, Tvek declared. We must ask them to return. With what? Nethaval asked quietly. We expelled them from the council. We told them they were unwelcome. We celebrated their departure. Why would they help us now? Another delegate raised an even more disturbing question. Do we even know where they went? The silence that followed was answer enough. The humans had vanished completely. Long-range sensors detected no trace of their ships or colonies. They had left the galaxy as quietly as they had left the council. As the emergency session continued, new reports arrived hourly. The cascade failures were accelerating. Systems that had worked flawlessly for generations were breaking down faster than they could be repaired. The golden age of galactic civilization was ending, and it was ending because they had lost the quiet engineers who had made it possible. 1 year after the humans departed, the Galactic Council did something it had never done before in 3,000 years of existence. It broke its own laws. The Council had always respected the territorial sovereignty of member species. No council. Ships were allowed to enter another species' space without permission. No council forces could investigate private colonies or settlements. These laws had kept the peace for millennia, but desperate times demanded desperate measures. Commander Velthar led the largest search fleet in galactic history. 200 ships from 30 different species, all united in a single mission: find the humans and bring them back. The fleet had been given unprecedented authority to search anywhere in known space. First target is the Sol system, Velthar announced to his diverse crew, humanity's original homeworld. The journey to Earth took 3 weeks at maximum warp. Velthar had visited the Sol system once before, during the early negotiations that brought humans into the Council. He remembered it as a bustling center of human civilization, with orbital stations, asteroid mining operations, and constant traffic between the planets. Now it was empty. Sensors detect no artificial signals, his science officer reported. No ships, no stations, no signs of current habitation. What about the planet? Velthar asked. Life signs are present, but they appear to be natural flora and fauna only. No technological signatures, no energy generation beyond basic geological activity. Velthar ordered a landing party to investigate. They found Earth's cities intact but abandoned. New York, London, Tokyo, Mumbai, all standing like museum displays. Buildings, roads, parks, and monuments remained exactly as humans had left them. But there was no technology more complex than mechanical clocks. Every computer had been removed. Every piece of advanced equipment was gone. Even the electrical wiring had been carefully extracted from the walls. The humans had left behind a planet that looked lived in, but contained no trace of their technological civilization. It's like they wanted to preserve it, one of the investigators reported. But they also wanted to make sure we couldn't learn anything from what they left behind. The pattern repeated at every human world they visited. New Geneva, humanity's first interstellar colony, stood empty but perfectly preserved. The streets were clean. The buildings were maintained. Automated systems still watered the parks and kept the air recycling. But no humans remained, and no advanced technology could be found. How long would this take? Velthar wondered aloud as he walked through the empty government district of New Geneva. How do you evacuate an entire planet so thoroughly? His aide, a young crystalline officer named Shetval, ran calculations on her portable device. Based on the population records, New Geneva housed 4.2 million humans. To evacuate that many people and remove all their technology would require months of preparation and coordination. Months, Velthar repeated. They were planning this evacuation long before they were expelled from the Council. The search fleet split up to cover more ground. Each squadron took responsibility for different sectors of human space. What they found was always the same: empty worlds, missing technology, and no clues about where the humans had gone. The Zephyrian Search Squadron discovered that human space habitats had been completely dismantled, not destroyed, but carefully taken apart piece by piece. The raw materials were gone, but the locations were marked with simple metal plaques that read, "Thank you for letting us live here." The Vorthak Squadron found that human research stations had been evacuated with the same thorough precision. Laboratories that had operated for decades were empty shells. All equipment was gone, but the buildings themselves were left in perfect condition. Most disturbing of all, the Commerce Guild investigators discovered that human trade agreements had been carefully concluded before the evacuation. Every debt had been paid. Every contract had been fulfilled. Every business relationship had been properly terminated with formal legal documents. They didn't just leave, reported Guild Auditor Nexthar. They closed down their entire civilization like a business that was changing locations. Everything was handled according to proper procedures. Commander Velthar gathered his squadron leaders for a strategy meeting aboard his flagship. The reports from all sectors painted the same picture: a complete, organized evacuation that must have taken years to plan and execute. "What about their ships?" he asked. "We've found no trace of human vessels anywhere." "That's the strangest part," replied Squadron Leader Yithkol. "According to our records, humanity operated over 3,000 starships of various classes. Everything from small scout vessels to massive colony transports. All of them are missing." "Where could they hide 3,000 ships?" Velthar demanded. "Unknown, sir. Our long-range sensors have swept every system within 500 light-years of human space. We've found no trace of their fleet. The search expanded beyond human territory. Council ships investigated uninhabited star systems, explored nebular clouds that could hide ships, and searched asteroid fields where a fleet might take refuge. They found nothing. Intercepted communications from the evacuation period revealed the scope of the operation. Humans had somehow coordinated the simultaneous evacuation of 14 planetary colonies, 17 space habitats, 43 research stations, and countless smaller outposts scattered across 200 light-years of space. The logistics alone are staggering, reported intelligence analyst Dex Moran. They moved 4 billion people and all their technology without leaving any trace of where they went. This would require planning, resources, and coordination on a scale we've never seen before. But they always seem so disorganized, protested Squadron Leader Korthmine. Their delegations were small. Their technology appeared primitive. How could they accomplish something this complex? Velthar was beginning to understand that the Council had fundamentally misunderstood humanity. The humans hadn't been primitive or disorganized. They had been deliberately understated, carefully hiding their true capabilities behind a facade of simplicity. The search teams found evidence of this deception everywhere they looked. Human colonies that appeared modest from space turned out to have extensive underground installations. Human ships that seemed basic had been equipped with advanced technology disguised as standard components. Human scientists who claimed to be students had actually been conducting sophisticated research that their hosts never fully understood. They were always more than they seemed, Veltar realized. We saw what they wanted us to see. After 6 months of searching, the fleet had covered most of known space without finding any trace of human civilization. The humans had vanished as completely as if they had never existed. But then, deep in the unexplored regions beyond the galactic rim, long-range sensors detected something unusual. Energy signatures that didn't match any known technology. Gravitational anomalies that suggested the presence of massive artificial structures. Radio signals too faint to decode but clearly of artificial origin. It's coming from outside the galaxy, the sensor operator reported. Far beyond any system we've ever explored. Velthar studied the readings with growing excitement. How far? At least 50,000 light-years beyond the outer rim, sir. Maybe more. Our sensors are at maximum range. Could the humans have traveled that far? Unknown, sir. We've never seen ships capable of such distances, but then again, we've never seen an evacuation like this either. Velthar faced an impossible decision. His ships could barely reach the edge of the galaxy. To travel 50,000 light-years beyond would require months of dangerous journey through unexplored space. Many of his ships might not survive the trip, but if the humans were out there, this might be their only chance to find them. Prepare the fleet for extended journey, he ordered. We're going beyond the rim. As the search fleet began its desperate voyage into the unknown, Council space continued its slide toward chaos. The cascade failures that had started with minor inconveniences were now threatening the basic infrastructure of galactic civilization, and somewhere in the darkness between galaxies the humans watched and waited. 2 years after the humans departed, Council Prime Zethkari stood before an emergency assembly that would have been unthinkable during the golden age of galactic civilization. Half the seats in the Great Hall were empty. Not because their representatives had chosen not to attend, but because they couldn't reach the Council station. The transportation network that had connected the galaxy for thousands of years was collapsing. Fellow beings, Zethkari began, his crystalline voice carrying notes of desperation he had never allowed before. We face the greatest crisis in Council history. The reports he presented painted a picture of accelerating disaster. The Zephyrian bioships that had once carried passengers and cargo across the galaxy were now so unreliable that most trade routes had been abandoned. Ships that had navigated space for centuries were getting lost on routine journeys. Some had simply vanished, their bioneural systems apparently forgetting how to navigate altogether. The crystalline hegemony reports complete communication breakdown with 17 outer colonies, Zethkari continued. Their quantum network suffers daily cascade failures. Planets that have been in constant contact for millennia are now isolated for weeks at a time. The economic impact was devastating. The Commerce Guild's trade calculations had become so unreliable that many merchants had returned to primitive barter systems. Financial markets that had operated smoothly for centuries were experiencing wild fluctuations as their optimization algorithms failed. The Fourth Act Defense Fleet can no longer guarantee protection for our shipping lanes, Zethkari admitted. Weapons accuracy has dropped to 40%. Their ships are barely more effective than civilian vessels. But the most terrifying development was the emergence of conflicts not seen since the pre-Council era. Species that had coexisted peacefully for millennia were now arguing over resources and territories. Without reliable communication and transportation, old grievances were surfacing. The Methanic Collective has withdrawn from the Outer Rim Accords, Zethkari reported. They claim the other signatories are violating trade agreements, but the communication delays make verification impossible. The Threxian Empire is mobilizing its fleet, he continued. They insist it's for defensive purposes, but their neighbors are responding with their own military preparations. Ambassador Tivek of the Peaceful Union raised a trembling appendage. Council Prime, what about the search fleet? Have they found any trace of the humans? Zethkari's form dimmed. Commander Velthar's last transmission was received 4 months ago. His fleet had traveled beyond the galactic rim, following energy signatures that might indicate human presence. We have heard nothing since. The silence that followed was filled with the sound of failing systems. The lights in the Great Hall flickered as the station's power grid struggled with efficiency problems that no one could solve. Life support systems hummed irregularly, forcing delegates to wear emergency breathing apparatus. How did we not see this coming? Whispered the crystalline delegate. How could we be so dependent on one species without realizing it? Archivist Nethaval, now the only being who truly understood the scope of humanity's contributions, spoke from her position at the data terminal. Because they designed it that way. Every improvement they made was invisible. Every system they enhanced continued to work normally. It just worked, better with their help. She displayed holographic projections, showing the gradual integration of human improvements into galactic infrastructure. They spent 2 centuries quietly making themselves indispensable, not through force or manipulation, but through competence. They simply made everything work better. But why? Demanded the Vorthak representative. Why would they do this if they knew we might reject them? Because it's what they do, Nethaval replied. Humans fix things. They see problems and they solve them, whether anyone asks them to or not. It's their nature. The realization was bitter. The species that the Council had dismissed as primitive had actually been the most sophisticated of all. While other races had focused on developing individual technologies, humans had mastered the art of making different technologies work together seamlessly. We need to contact them, Tivek insisted. We need to apologize and ask them to return. How? Zethkari asked. Our communication networks are failing. We can barely maintain contact with our own colonies. Even if we knew where they were, we couldn't reach them reliably. Then we send a ship, Tivek suggested. A single vessel carrying our formal apology and an invitation to return. Where would we send it? Nethaval asked quietly. We've searched the entire galaxy. The humans are gone. As the assembly debated hopeless solutions, another power failure plunged the chamber into emergency lighting. In the red-tinged darkness, the scope of their catastrophe became clear. The species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia could no longer maintain their own meeting hall. It was then that Nethaval activated a recording she had discovered in the human embassy's archives. Elena Vasquez's final message, broadcast just before the human evacuation began. The image of the former human ambassador appeared in the center of the chamber. She looked exactly as she had 2 years ago, calm, professional, and quietly determined. If you are viewing this message, Elena's image said, then you have discovered what our absence means to your civilization. We hoped it would not come to this, but we prepared for the possibility. We want you to know that we bear no malice toward any species in the Council. We understand why you asked us to leave. We were different from you in ways that made you uncomfortable. We accepted your decision with respect. We also want you to know that we tried to help quietly, without seeking recognition or reward. We believed that if we could make your systems work better, we could earn our place among you through contribution rather than politics. We were wrong about that, but we were not wrong about the value of what we offered. Elena's image paused as if she were looking directly at each delegate in the chamber. "We will not return to the council," she continued. "You made your choice and we have made ours. We are building something new, something that reflects our values and capabilities without compromise. But we want to offer you one final gift. In the archives of our embassy, you will find complete documentation of every improvement we made to your systems. The knowledge is there if you wish to use it. It will take you many years to understand it all, and many more years to implement it properly. But it is possible. We hope you will choose cooperation over conflict as your systems fail. We hope you will remember that different does not mean inferior. And we hope that someday when you have rebuilt what you have lost, you will understand why we could not stay. Goodbye and good luck." The message ended, leaving the assembly in stunned silence. "The archives," Zethkari whispered. "Did anyone check the human embassy archives?" "They were sealed when the humans left," his aide replied. "Standard procedure for abandoned diplomatic facilities." "Unseal them," Zethkari ordered. "Immediately." Within hours, teams of the galaxy's best scientists and engineers were working frantically in the abandoned human embassy. What they found was both a treasure and a torment. Complete technical documentation for every system the humans had improved, written in clear, simple language that any competent engineer could understand. But understanding the documentation and implementing it were different things. The improvements were incredibly sophisticated, requiring precise coordination between multiple systems. It would take decades just to train enough engineers to handle the work. Meanwhile, galactic civilization continued its collapse. Space travel became increasingly dangerous as navigation systems failed. Communication breakdowns left entire sectors isolated. Trade ground to a halt as merchant guilds could no longer coordinate their operations reliably. Some species began to withdraw to their home systems, abandoning the dream of galactic unity. Others formed smaller alliances based on geographical proximity rather than shared ideals. The Great Council that had united the galaxy was fracturing into smaller, weaker groups. As Zethkari worked through another crisis report, he thought about Elena Vasquez's words. The humans had offered them one final gift, the knowledge to rebuild what they had lost. But they had also made it clear that they would not return to help. Somewhere beyond the rim of the galaxy, humanity was building a new civilization. Free from the constraints and prejudices of the Council, they were becoming what they had always had the potential to be. And in the dying light of the galactic golden age, the Council finally understood what they had lost when they let the humans leave quietly. The price of their arrogance was the collapse of everything they had built. The humans had left quietly. And in their silence, the galaxy learned the true value of those who fix things without seeking praise, who help without demanding recognition, and who contribute without requiring thanks. It was a lesson that came too late to save them,